You didn't think I'd be leaving out the shows, did you? That would be straight up being a bad Ferengi of me. I mean, bad Starfleet officer of me. I'm not doing this for the algorithm, not at all. But seriously, we all know nerds love ranking things, and because I did my video last week on ranking every single Star Trek movie, I figured for this week I would be ranking every single Star Trek TV show for your enjoyment. However, I want to put a little spin on this type of list, do my own little Picard maneuver, as it were. I guess we'll call it the Jessie maneuver. That sounds sexual.
Picard maneuver. Wait, no, that's actually a thing, isn't it?
We'll make it sexual eventually, but for today, the Jessie maneuver is that I'm not going to be ranking these TV shows, all of the Star Trek shows, by necessarily what I think they're qualitative stances, because I feel like that list ultimately would kind of get a little bit boring. But for this list, I want to try and do something a little bit different and rank the Star Trek shows by what I think they mean to me and how personally I resonate with them. Because I feel like by sharing what they mean to me, that'll add a little bit more of a different spin on it, and will also now allow all of you the chance to share what you think and what resonates with you for each Star Trek show, because I would love to hear all of that down in the comments after we finish this video. I want to know what Star Trek shows resonate with you. Also, I should state before we get started that I love every Star Trek show. Like, there is literally not a one in this bunch that I do not love, and I think that each one of them has unique things to adore and love and appreciate. But with that in mind, keep in mind this list is going to be surprising. I am sure it's going to be surprising for many of you, which shows resonate with me and which don't. However, before we get started with my official list, I have a really cool announcement for this channel. This week, everything will be going as normal on this channel. I will be releasing a video on Wednesday, as well as my review of Falcon and the Winter Soldier's finale on Friday, as well as my sort of big sort of featured video that I do every single Friday on this channel. However, next week, there will be no Monday or Wednesday videos. The reason being is that on Friday, I will be releasing what I think is probably my biggest video to date. I put a lot of work into this video. It's going to be called The Nature of Work. I think it might be some of my best work that I have ever done, and I really want to build hype for it. Also, within that video, I will be making a big announcement about not only my personal life, but about this channel. Don't worry, all positive things, but I think it is something really cool and really exciting for me and for this channel going forward, and I'm so excited to share it with all of you. Please come join me 11 a.m. Pacific time for the premiere of the video The Nature of Work next week, which will be the only video that I will be releasing next week. So as a certain captain would say, engage, hit it. There's coffee in that nebula. Let's fly. Whatever Saru ends up saying. What does Kirk say? Let's have sex with it. That's Kirk's thing.
Time to take this puppy off its leash.
All right, at the very bottom of the list is Star Trek the Animated Series.
Okay, this whole thing has gone far enough. Sir, I've just picked up my clean uniforms from the service chute, and when I put this one on, I discovered this.
Now, I know this show's placement on the list is going to be the least surprising place on this list, because I feel like most of us would place the animated series at the bottom of any list that we were making. That being said, though, I do feel like Star Trek the Animated Series is a very underappreciated show. I think there's a lot of really good gems and wonderful things about it, and in fact, the episode Yesteryear may be one of my favorite Star Trek episodes of all time. It's certainly in the conversation for top 10. So there is some really good things to discuss about this show. However, I ultimately feel it's a little bit slower paced, a little bit dull. The animations get very repetitive if you're watching this in a binge, so the lower budget aspect of it definitely comes into play in a large way if you're sort of watching these all the way through. So overall, I kind of would place it at the bottom, despite the fact that I think it has some really inventive ideas and helped keep the torch of Star Trek alive for several years between the original series and the movie.
I regret having troubled you in any way, but it was necessary.
I trust you can explain why it was necessary.
There was a decision to be made. A direction for my life had to be chosen.
Next up on the list, we have Star Trek Picard.
Appropriately sinister.
Now, I should say, for all the ongoing Star Trek series, there's going to be an asterisk on their place on the list, because these shows are still ongoing and they have every chance of getting infinitely better or infinitely worse. But as I sit here looking at Star Trek Picard, which at the time of this recording this video has only had its first season released, I feel somewhat overall disappointed with the show. That's not to say that there weren't really great ideas and thoughts within the show. I think that some of the concepts and ideas and the ways that the Picard tackled blind spots of the Federation and where sort of the Federation may fail at being a utopia, I think was a great and prescient thing for this show to say and for it to tackle. I also think it handled some characters really well, in my opinion. I think Seven of Nine's arc in this show, at least in the first season, was really, really great. But overall, I found the show to be somewhat disappointing in that it set up a lot of really great ideas, but ultimately didn't focus on them or pay them off very well, and ultimately kind of left me feeling a little bit frustrated with all the wasted potential that this series displayed during this first season. Again, there's a lot of good here, and I am very excited for season 2 because I think the show probably has the most potential out of any of the Star Trek shows going on right now. But as it sits right now, it's going to be number 9 on my list.
Honestly feel that you regained your humanity.
Yes.
All of it.
No. But we're both working on it. Aren't we?
Next up, we have short treks.
According to your report, this entire calamity was all caused by one crew member. How do you explain that?
He was an idiot.
Short treks is an idea that I really, really love. I love the idea of sort of an anthology, sort of mini Star Trek show that can kind of do a bunch of different things in a bunch of different ways and do some weird things with it. And some of these short treks have definitely done that. Children of Mars, Ephraim and Dot, Calypso have all done strange and interesting turns on the Star Trek universe that I don't think we would have gotten in any other way, and I thought were truly unique and beautiful. And also, I think short treks has delivered some really great standalone episodes, like the episode Q&A, which I thought was a sort of really great usage of number 1 and Ethan Peck, sort of a mini.
Do Vulcans ever feel awe, Spock?
They do, Captain, but they tend to keep it to themselves.
Strange New Worlds episodes to tide us over until that show eventually comes out. All that being said, though, I don't feel like it's truly ever completely capitalized on all of its ideas. A lot of its episodes, especially in its sort of front half, felt like they were sort of like webisodes, sort of like things to sort of set up dangling plot threads in the season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, or setting us up for Strange New Worlds and sort of like getting those productions underway and sort of test beds for that. That ultimately I was kind of a little bit disappointed because I feel like they could do a whole hell of a lot more and see so many different corners of the galaxy and do so many different things within short treks, that to use them as sort of like little webisodes for the TV shows proper is ultimately kind of a disappointing use of them. And so ultimately I feel like short treks is another one of those shows like Picard that has a lot of potential, and if they do continue them, I think they can do some really cool things, but as it sits right now, sits very low on my list. All right, here's where things are going to start to get contentious, because next up is Star Trek, the original series.
Logical decision, logically arrived at.
Yes, Star Trek, the original series sits very low on my list. And the show, let's all be honest, while I think a lot of its messages and ideas have aged very well, the characterizations of its characters have aged supremely well, some other things in the show, like its general sexism and some of the sort of awkwardness in some of its storytelling and some of the places that the storytelling is focused on don't read all that well today. You know, it obviously spawned some great things, some great characters, and there are some truly unique and amazing episodes on display here, especially with like things like Balance of Terror, which I, again, would place in one of my top 10 Star Trek episodes of all time. Ultimately, like I said, it kind of becomes a mixed bag, and for me personally, the way it resonates with me personally is, while I love the character of Spock, and I love the triumvirate of Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and I love the classic iconic characters that the show gave to us in many ways. That being said, I would say the Star Trek movies utilize these characters much better, to my opinion, and I love these characters, and I love them when they go into the actual films proper. That, in my opinion.
Time has resumed its shape. All is as it was before. Many such journeys are possible. Let me be your gateway.
All right, we're going to keep going down the hot takes rabbit hole here, because next up is Star Trek The Next Generation.
With mine eyes, for they in thee 1,000 errors see, but 'tis my heart that loves what they despise, who, in despite of view, art pleased to dote. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
Whoo boy, I know that this is where people are going to lose me. But that being said, while I adore Star Trek The Next Generation, I think that it is probably has some of the strongest episodes of the entire series overall. For me, the characters in the show don't resonate as strongly. I resonate a lot with Picard and Data, and when I went back through to do a rewatch, I really resonated with Riker and his very, very, very sexy beard. Can we also just appreciate that every time someone even mentions the idea of sex in The Next Generation, Riker always gets a reaction shot, and he just always has that like twinkling smile where he just sort of like is like, yeah, you're getting some. I'm all about that. Good for you.
A Betazoid woman, when she goes through this phase, quadruples her sex drive.
Or more.
Or more. Never told me that.
I didn't want to frighten you.
Congratulations, sir.
Anyways, back to what I was saying. Star Trek The Next Generation, I think, has a lot of great ideas. It saved this franchise. Without Next Generation, Star Trek would not exist today. It really set the stage for everything that came after in a truly unique way and really set the standard for what Star Trek is. But like I said, the characters don't resonate as much with me. I love Data and Picard and Riker. All the other characters I think are good, but they just don't hit me as hard as some other characters in later shows do. And I feel like some of the concepts that this show brings up, while they sort of did it first, I feel like different series, even outside of Star Trek, have done some of the ideas in the show even better. So ultimately, for me, this show doesn't resonate as much, even though I recognize that it's probably one of the higher quality shows overall within the Star Trek franchise.
The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth, whether it's scientific truth, or historical truth, or personal truth. It is the guiding principle on which Starfleet is based. If you can't find it within yourself to stand up and tell the truth about what happened, you don't deserve to wear that uniform.
Next up, we have Star Trek Voyager.
There's coffee in that nebula.
Star Trek Voyager is another one of those shows that I will say has a lot of wasted potential. A lot of the ideas that this show started off with, like the Maquis, the being stuck in the Delta Quadrant, really kind of were, sadly, for the most part, especially earlier on in the show, left on the table and not utilized to their fullest. That being said, taking the show for what it is, I really resonate with the characters in this show. The Doctor, Janeway, Seven of Nine, Tuvok, I think are all some of the... Tom Paris, to a degree, especially as he moves on. B'Elanna Torres, this character sort of struggling with dual heritage aspect of her. And I've talked about all the other characters in numerous other videos. Like, there are just so many characters I think are so deeply written and deeply explored that while necessarily the plots of the shows didn't fully utilize them as much as they could have, the characters really resonate so much with me in such a fundamental way that I don't think I could really... I would be doing a disservice if I didn't really say how much I adore Voyager, even if I recognize its many, many flaws because of just the characters. I really think it's the characters of this show that really sort of propel this show up higher than it probably would be in a sort of more qualitative list.
I find myself constructing scenarios, considering alternative possibilities.
Also, while Voyager did get sometimes very tropey with its things like time travel and alternate dimensions and things like that, sort of like reusing old science fiction tropes, the tropes that it used I particularly like. Like, I like time travel stuff, even though it is overutilized in this show. I always love a good time travel story, and so while it did get kind of overused in Voyager, the tropes that did get overused, I happen to like. So take that for what you will.
You are one of my most valued officers. And you are my friend. It is vital that you understand me here. I need you.
Next up on our list, we have Star Trek Discovery.
Spock believed that together you could create something bigger than yourselves. That's what this quorum is. That's what Navarre is. That's what the Federation is.
Star Trek Discovery, I know, is a very contentious show for many people, for many reasons. And I understand why some people don't look at Discovery and think that it is Star Trek for them. As long as you're not gatekeeping people and saying that this isn't good Star Trek, but you're sort of saying this Star Trek isn't for me, I understand you. But for me, I have to appreciate Star Trek Discovery for so many different, varied, and personal reasons. The first and foremost of which is that Star Trek Discovery is the first Star Trek show that I really felt the Trek community being involved in alongside of me as I watched watched it. You know, all the other Star Trek shows I mainly watched when I was a kid in isolation in the early days of the internet, and I didn't really have a lot of friends who were into Star Trek, so I didn't really get to share Star Trek as much on television until Discovery. It really was that first one that did that for me. And I just love talking week to week about Discovery with so many people, and it was the first show to sort of bring that together. And I got to like share Discovery and Star Trek with people that I love that maybe don't really like some of the older Star Trek shows. So it allowed me to include other people in my fandom that normally wouldn't have, as well as find other Trekkies as well that I hadn't really connected with before. And for that, I will always appreciate and love Discovery. I also feel like Star Trek Discovery is a show that I really appreciate that it takes a lot of risks. For a lot of people, those risks don't pay off. A lot of people don't feel like this is what Star Trek should be doing. And I understand that. For me, I always appreciate a show that will try to go for the home run rather than one that will just try and play it safe and bunt it and just try to go for it. I shouldn't be using sports metaphors. I don't know sports all that well. I'm surprised I even knew what a bunt was, but you sort of get my point. Like, Star Trek Discovery will not always hit that home run, and it will whiff it hard sometimes. But I feel like when it connects, it is doing some bold and fun and crazy things with this show.
Wherever our mission takes us, we'll try to have a little fun along the way too, huh? Make a little noise. Ruffle a few feathers.
I look forward to it, Captain.
This show is also in fact, it is the most diverse Star Trek show. Finally putting on camera what the show has always talked about. Like, not to say that other Star Trek shows haven't been diverse, they have been. But this show really is the first that feels like truly, truly encompasses such a wide variety of what humanity is in such a really stellar way. And so for that, I just feel like Star Trek Discovery, for all of its faults and foibles, I really love it, and I am so excited to watch it week to week, and excited to see where it will take me.
There is a whole galaxy out there, full of people who will reach for you. You have to let them.
All right, now we are into our final 3 Star Trek shows, and I have to be honest, I fought really hard. Each of these 3 shows are like razor thin, razor close, and I could put them in any order, to be very, very frank with you. So this order would vary on any other day. So just know that these top 3 are honestly all really tied for 3. But because this is the internet and I have to rank them, this is the rank that I would put them in for right now. Number 3, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It kills me even saying that, because I want to put Deep Space Nine as number 1, because honestly, it's, I think, the Star Trek show that I think is just qualitatively the best.
So I will learn to live with it. Because I can live with it.
Deep Space Nine feels like the show that, while it does have some mistakes here and there, is the first Star Trek show to fully take complete ownership and control and utilize its concept to its fullest. I feel like almost every idea that could have been explored in Deep Space Nine is explored to at least some degree. When you look at all the other Star Trek shows, even Next Generation to some degree, there are always these elements lingering in the show that you feel like, I kind of wish they had gone that way. I wish they kind of explored this. And with Deep Space Nine, it's the one show where there is an element of that, truly. I think there are some aspects of Deep Space Nine that could have been explored more, but it's the one that feel like it really took the time to explore everything and say pretty much everything that it wanted to say, and I adore that for it. It also has some of the most complex and bold storylines for any Star Trek show, while still feeling Star Trek and still feeling like it managed to mix this like familial feeling that we have with Star Trek, and yet also do bold new things with it, trying to, tell a Star Trek show that doesn't boldly go anywhere, at least for the first few seasons, that stays at a space station, that really grounds itself in lingering and long-running storylines. It is by no means a perfect show, as no Star Trek show is, but I just truly appreciate it. Also, the characters on the show are fantastic. Dax is a character that I have talked about repeatedly that meant so much to me throughout my entire life. I would not be the person I am today without what I learned through watching Dax as a character. But even beyond her, Bashir, O'Brien, and their like loving bromance, Cisco, all the side characters like Garrick. This show is just fantastic, and it honestly kills me to put it at number 3.
We're going to get a second chance. Jake, my sweet boy,
But there are reasons why I would put these other two higher. So let's move on to number 2, Star Trek Lower Decks.
I wish you would take this seriously.
I am. Ooh, this is the new shuttle with the blast shield. Yeah. The blast shield is the blast shield. And it comes down and it goes up. Blast shield.
This is also going to be, I'm sure, another very contentious one. And again, it's one that I have to put an asterisk next to because Lower Decks could go up, it could go down, in my opinion, as the show goes on because it's still ongoing. But Lower Decks is very much like the Star Trek show that I feel I always wanted. Many of you know who've been watching this channel for a very long time that I am someone who likes to deconstruct things, to sort of like take things apart and sort of look at their pieces and see what they're made of. And Star Trek Lower Decks does that. It's sort of taking apart Star Trek and sort of like laughing at its pieces, laughing at what's there, and yet it never feels like it's like beating up or destroying the toys. It's sort of like carefully taking them apart, looking at them, sort of being like, oh, that's sort of strange and weird, and then carefully gluing them back together and upholding them in such a loving and caring way that I just so appreciate. For Lower Decks, it never feels like that the show is just destroying what Star Trek is, but upholding it. I think of the joke, for example, of like when Rutherford wants to change jobs in episode 2 and go to new divisions, and there's this joke played that it's going to be like hard for him to ask his coworkers to change to another division, but everyone just says like, no, it's wonderful, go and explore, be your best person, see who you can be, and everyone just affirms him and loves him in such a wonderful way, and that's just so, it deconstructs what Star Trek is, and yet affirms what Star Trek is in such a loving way.
I'd like permission to leave the bear pack.
Rutherford, that is outstanding. Gotta be true to yourself. Am I right, Bears? Hurrah!
Oh, Bears!
I also think the character arcs in the show are some of the most concise and some of the most well thought out and fleshed out from the beginning. Other Star Trek shows have had great character arcs, but this is the first Star Trek show that, like, from the start, it felt like it knew what it wants to say and do with its characters, and they felt like fully formed people from the very first episode, as opposed to other Star Trek shows where most of them had to, like, feel into who the characters were. This show knew who the characters were from episode 1, and that's just so cool to see that confidence out of the gate. Speaking of characters, Tendi is, like, one of my favorite characters of all time. I freaking adore her. She is such an optimistic, hopeful, excited person, and I probably will do a whole video on Tendi and just how much I adore her so much, and how much I see her as the example of who I want to be. Someone just excited and happy and just reveling in life and learning and community.
Do you remember me at all?
Well, no. But don't take it personally. I don't remember what I don't remember.
You know what this means, right? We get to become best friends all over again!
Okie dokie.
Just enjoy Tendi. And then also, I just like humor. I like things that I'm a person who, as you can tell on this channel, I like jokes. I like making fun of things. I like having a little bit of a reverence for things. And so Lower Decks having that comedy aspect to it, I just really adore. But this does bring me to my final show on this list, which, if you know me, it shouldn't surprise you. But for some of you, it may surprise you. But the show number 1 on this list is Star Trek Enterprise.
Been a long road.
I know.
Getting from there to here.
I know.
But my time is finally near.
I know.
And they're not gonna hold me down no more. No, they're not gonna change my mind.
I know.
'Cause I've got faith of the heart.
Star Trek Enterprise is the weird, ugly duckling of the Star Trek universe. It has some of the most strangest, tepid, lukewarm, vanilla takes on Star Trek.
Tea? I only drink water.
So,
the first couple seasons of this show have a lot of problems, let's just put it mildly, and it ultimately feels like very much like it didn't know exactly what it wanted to say. There's a lot of wasted potential with a prequel series, with this, especially with the first few seasons, and it does some really weird things in those choices. Like there's some weird episodes like A Night in Sickbay. And yet, also, towards the end of its run, Star Trek Enterprise started doing things that were bold and radical for the Star Trek franchise, but also set the stage for what the Star Trek franchise would become. Season 3 of the show was the first Star Trek show that had a front-to-back sort of serialized season-long story arc, something that Discovery and Picard and many other Star Trek shows do to this day. So it was prescient in that, and I thought that story was so cool and inventive, and yeah, it had some stumbles here and there, but was like just a cool idea to bring this temporal Cold War idea into a 9/11 story arc. That, again, fumbles in there, but I thought was just such a bold take for Star Trek, which is what Star Trek should be doing. Season 4 of the show continued that, telling really interesting and unique arcs within the Star Trek formula that if the show had continued, I think could have made it the best in the Star Trek series in so many different ways. And also it brought the fan service in a way that felt like it was, fan service, cool stuff for us fans, but never felt overly gratuitous in a lot of cases. It was just so much fun. And so ultimately, it leaves Star Trek Enterprise in this really weird space that's like, it has some of the weirdest parts of Star Trek, the most like vanilla parts of Star Trek, and yet some of also the most boldest parts of Star Trek. And in many ways, it kind of, if you look at Enterprise as a series, it kind of encompasses everything that I love and hate and am sort of laughing at and sometimes laughing with at Star Trek. Like, Star Trek Enterprise is basically Star Trek as a franchise distilled into 4 seasons. All the good, all the bad, and all that's in between. And I really adore it for that. And for my own personal thing as well, this was the first Star Trek show that I got to watch week to week. Discovery is the show I got to find a community with, but Star Trek Enterprise was my show. I would sit down every week and I just got to love it and enjoy it and get excited with new episodes. And feel like I was getting to explore this new universe week to week. And that was just so meaningful and resonating in my childhood. And when Star Trek Enterprise left the air and Star Trek sort of went off the air for a good chunk of time, I felt that emptiness. I felt the emptiness that Star Trek Enterprise left me with when it went away. And it just made me always feel the more fondly about it. We feel fondness in absence. And since Star Trek Enterprise was that last show, but it was a show that meant so much to me week to week, the fondness for it has only ever grown in my estimation. And yes, it's got a lot of problems, but heavens if I don't love it. So, Star Trek Enterprise, #1 show on my list. Who would have thought?
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us.
But that all being said, like I said at the top of this video, I want to hear what your favorite Star Trek shows are. What are the Star Trek shows that resonate with you? What are the things that resonate with you, with them, about you, with them? You know what I'm trying to say. I want to hear all of that down in the comments below. But beyond all of it, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget that next week there will be no videos on Monday or Wednesday, but there will be a big, important video with a big announcement for my channel on Friday called The Nature of Work. Come join me for the premiere for that. I'm very excited for that video. It might be the best video I've ever done, so please come join me for that. I am so excited to share it with all of you and the announcement that's going to be coming with this channel. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Here we go. So I'm finally here, performing for you. If you know the words, you can join in too. Put your hands together if you want to clap, as I thank you all with this patron rap. Catherine Lambeth, Miranda Janelle, Ashley Allen, Bo Kikio, Eli Bergmas, Ashlyn Solstice, John Cool, Greg Gillum, Stephen Kleinard, Randy Thompson, Felicia Toast, Wellington Marcus, Boyd Earl and Mary Beth Earl, Stephen Schuhart, Wayne Twitchell, Corey Honkanen, Anvale Dunn, A Man Chooses, A Slave Obeys, Ish the Mad, Dominic Noble, Buttoneer, John Steele. What does God need with a starship? Michael Beam, Meadow Whisperer, William Steele, Chamomile Tea, BBD, Munir Amlani, Jason Knott, John Weatherby, Maeve Liama, Bree Beecher, Andrew K, Nathan Steele, Sky Skinner, Sean Piper, Flynn, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Tiffany Danger, Cass the Last, Laura Dermero, Geek Filter, Mari Neckar, Troy Stull, Gretchen Badger, Pissed and Twisted Garage, Bush, Jane Packard, James Krivda, Din, W. Randy E. D. Ellie O'Dare, John H. McDougal, Celestial John, Jacob Tovar, Sarah Bystam, Jessica Chapman, Lysa, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Polly Mina, Andrew Lamoureux, Jennifer Fuss, Zone 1 Librarian, Jenny Mabel, and Michael Hardy. Thank you so much. I hope you appreciate me being a dorky weirdo that's totally off key with any sort of beat, but thank you so much, patrons. I love you all.